Hi guys, Dragoneither here. Today I'm with Haosren again, and we've been talking about something that is very prevalent at the moment. We want to talk about certain cards in the current meta which are good, certain cards we think are very good, and a couple of cards we think which would be very interesting to talk about in the future meta, if not in the current meta and how they work now. Just to start it off, we have the obvious fire and ice hands. So many people struggle with fire and ice hands and have to put up with them because they are an engine that basically runs themselves. Whether you run 4 or 6, 2 of each or 3 of each, they basically tend to thin out your own deck, get rid of your opponent's card, and get themselves out with little to no backlash. And generally, if your opponent can't deal with them, it just turns up to be something that's, very damaging to them and very good for you. So we're going to start off with a couple of cards that actually work against fire and ice hands and against their decks. First of all, I'd like to state that Fire Hand's effect to destroy a monster and then to special summon, as it says, you can target one monster they control, destroy that target, then you can special summon one Ice Hand from your deck. I like to call it a subchain. Basically, the way I like to explain this is it has a subchain 1 of where it destroys a monster, then a subchain 2 of where it special summons Ice Hand. In short, Fire Hand will stop the effect of your opponent's Fire Hand and Ice Hand, because how it works is, because of the then effect, which has a subchain 2 as I like to call it, the first part of the chain, the subchain 1, destroys the monster, but it hasn't resolved the effect, because if it does successfully destroy it, you can special summon the Ice Hand, and that basically goes into like what I like to call a subchain 2, which means your opponent's fire or ice hand cannot activate their effects until your subchain 2, as I like to call it, resolves. So if you're fire hand and you destroy their fire hand, you destroy theirs, their monster is destroyed and gets sent to the grave. It can't activate their effect because your effect hasn't finished resolving yet. So then you special summon out Ice Hand, and their Fire Hand or Ice Hand misses timing.
Only their Fire Hand will miss timing.
Ice Hand will miss it actually as well.
But Ice Hand has lower attack than Fire Hand. They both don't die if they clash. Ice Hand dies. If you crash Fire Hand into an Ice Hand has lower attack, so Ice Hand's not going to die.
It's not that. It's the fact that even if they mirror force your Fire Hand, and then you activate your Fire Hand's effect from grave to target and destroy their Ice Hand, it'll destroy Ice Hand, and then, after it's been destroyed, it'll special summon out your Ice Hand. So their Ice Hand's effect won't go off.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Just thought we'd clarify that with you guys. Because of the then effect, as I like to call it, it has a subchain 1 and a subchain 2. Subchain 1 must resolve in order for subchain 2 to come off. So if Fire Hand doesn't destroy a monster, you will not get the summon out. Similarly, if Ice Hand doesn't destroy the spell or trap, you will not get the Fire Hand out. Deep Prison is very good at the moment. Mirror Force, for the reason as just said, isn't played a lot because of,
The hand meta.
Yeah. Deep Prison will stop hands entirely because it'll banish them straight out, which means they're not going to get their effects because they get banished and not destroyed and sent to the grave. Forbidden Chalice works. Basically, you can activate it during the
Damage step.
Damage calculation. Damage calculation because it changes attack and defense. So after the damage step.
Yep.
During, but later in it. When certain other cards cannot be played.
Yeah, damage calculation is part of the damage step, isn't it?
Yeah, but damage calculation is a part where you can only activate cards which directly alter the attack and defense of monsters, which is why you can play Forbidden Chalice during that time. Basically, you can make it so when you play Forbidden Chalice on their Fire Ice hand, it will follow them to the grave as long as you can still destroy it. 2,000 attack on the Fire hand. It will follow them to the grave and they won't get the effect off. The first effect of Breakthrough Skill will not follow them to the grave, but the second effect will. However, Finish Chain's a little bit different. Finish Chain you can use to stop their attack going through in attack declaration, but if they've lanced or something in response, Finish Chain will not follow their effect to the grave. So they will get their effect off, they will pop, which is why Finish Chain isn't seen too much. I mean, it will stop them for a little bit if you can deal with them other ways, like banish them out during your turn if you're playing like a Chaos deck, or one of my most favourite cards, Karma Cut, does work very well. Also banishes copies from the grave. But yeah, otherwise, you know, it's up to you to deal with it. But I just like to point out that cards that have a then effect will force Fire and Ice hand to miss timing, which also includes Fire hand forcing other Fire or Ice hands to miss timing. That should be all, unless of course you got something to say.
No, that wraps up about everything I have come across with Fire and Ice hand at the moment.
Next up we want to talk about a few different cards. Mainly in this set is cards that that have a cost of discarding and how they are very powerful cards. In particular, we want to talk about just put them on that.
Put them on that.
We want to talk about cards like Divine Wrath and Karma Cut and Phoenix Wing Wind Blast at the first. Now, these cards have been seeing a lot more play in the meta. Maybe not Karma Cut so much, but definitely Phoenix Wing and Divine Wrath. I've seen them a lot more recently. Now, the reason why Phoenix Wing is so good is because basically if you use its effect, you will stack a card back onto your opponent's deck, which means they basically have to draw back into that if they don't shuffle it after. Which means you can basically choose what they draw into. It works very well with Wiretap, because if you can use Phoenix Wing and Wiretap and stack cards back into their deck, you're basically stacking, if you chain them to your opponent's cards, say you play Phoenix Wing, they play Wiretap, then you play Wiretap, you're stacking your Wiretap back into the deck and whatever you Phoenix Wing as well. Which means the deck, if they started a 40 card deck, is now back to a 42 card deck. So if it's a card they don't want to use, it's really helpful. Use again, it's really helpful. Or if they just don't want to draw into it. Also, Karma Cut is very good because it just outright banishes, and it banishes every copy in the grave. Works well against Harpies, Fire hands, Ice hands. Just generally good. Now, the difference, something is a bit different with Divine Wrath. Now, Divine Wrath is, it's very good because it's a counter trap, but it can be used on more than just cards on the field. If in fact you Honest, you can chain Divine Wrath to an Honest. If your opponent activates the effect of a Fire or Ice hand in the grave, you can chain Divine Wrath to the card in the grave. You can't chain it to cards that use their effect in the main deck. I don't have many examples because there's not many that do that, but basically the idea is Divine Wrath will stop any monster effect, whether it's from hand or grave or field, just not from the main deck, but there's not many that do that. And it's a counter trap, so they can't lance. That's why this is good, because your opponent cannot lance in response to Divine Wrath. These are good because you can play them in response to Forbidden Lance or other cards, but this is good because you can just outright stop even cards from the hand. Cards from hand aren't seen a lot of play, but it does help a lot. You can play this during damage calculation as well. So
that's how it gets around Honest.
That's one of the ways. Gets around Honest really well. Also can get around cards like Bujin Sinew and Bujin Ukraine. But yeah, generally, it's good because it gets around a lot of things, and there's not a lot of ways your opponent can protect it other than like wiretap or 7 tools. Next up is we'd like to talk about Imperial Iron Wall. Keep kind of cut out. We need this. Imperial Iron Wall, Debunk, and Karma Cut. Just a brief story that if you have Imperial Iron Wall on the field, cards cannot be banished. Basically, it means that you cannot activate cards which have the effect to banish, like Karma Cut or Debunk. This is very good when you're running hands because it means your opponent will not be able to banish out your hands, which means you're more likely to get your effects off. It also works well against Bujins and spellbooks. Now, we also have a couple of other cards to talk about. Now, the idea of these cards Debunk, Divine Wrath, and
Blackhorn.
Now, the idea of these is that they can be used in certain summon attempts to stop a summon. Now, if you're running these 3 cards in your main deck, there's a lot of summons from hand and grave that you can stop. Blackhorn works on inherit summons, whereas these 2 will work on chained summons. This has a limitation where it can only work on chain summons from the grave or from the hand. So it does work against hands. It'll banish hands. This works against hands as well, but it can also stop the destroying effect. This doesn't work against hands, but this will work against cards like Cyber Dragon or Noble Knight Gawain, as I said, whereas these 2 won't, because this will stop inherit summons. So this will stop XYZs, Synchros, Contact Fusion, inherit summons like Cyber Dragon and Noble Knight Gawain. It won't stop cards like High Priestess of Prophecy, however these 2 will. Because they start a chain, you can, like cards like High Priestess of Prophecy starts chains, you can chain Debunk to it, negate the effect of High Priestess of Prophecy and banish it. You can also debunk an Honest, however Honest will not be, and Effect Valor, however Honest will not be banished because it's no longer in the hand, it'll just have its effect negated, and same with Valor because you have to tribute them to pay the cost. Divine Wrath is similar, it'll stop Effect Valor and it'll stop Honest, and it'll stop High Priestess of Prophecy, but their effects will be negated and they'll be destroyed, basically. So basically when you run these 3 together, you're stopping almost any kind of summon from the hand your opponent can do. Because this will stop inherits and this will stop chain summons from the hand. Whereas this will stop a lot of other things. It's a dirty combo that me and Haosren have been playing out, and
it's working quite well. It
works incredibly well when you chain these 3 together. The other thing I'd like to point out is if you stop a Synchro or XYZ summon, it means that the summon has not been successful. The card has not been created, which means if they try to soul charge, say there's a Stardust Dragon, and you play Black Horn of Heaven in response to the summon of the Stardust, or the attempt to summon, and you negate that summon, Stardust was not created, therefore they cannot attempt to soul charge the Stardust back out. Also cards like Starlight Road, and it also works with Solemn Warning the same way with Blackhorn. Cards like Starlight Road, which special summon out Stardust, means that Stardust has not been created from a Synchro summon, even if it gets out. It hasn't been created from the Synchro summon successfully, which means if Stardust uses its effect and goes to the grave, it cannot special summon itself out from the grave because it was not created.
It was just special summoned from the
just-
extra deck by
yeah.
the effect of a card.
Yeah.
Yep.
And similarly, Warning works like that. Warning does a lot, actually. Warning will
does
stop.
too much.
Warning will respond to the chain, like Debunk and Divine Wrath do. Warning will stop inherit summons. Warning will stop cards that summon, like ritual cards. Just everything. Another one I'd like to talk about quickly was Chivalry. This card hasn't seen any play whatsoever. I don't even know if people know this card exists or not. But this works against fire and ice hands, similar to the way that Debunk does. And it's basically activate this card only during the battle phase when the effect of an opponent's effect monster is activated. Negate the activation and destroy that card. It works the same as Divine Wrath, but you don't discard. But it's limited to only activating during the battle phase. It's gone a lot longer than I expected. Also, Mind Crush works. You can chain to cards like High Priestess of Prophecy, just like Divine Wrath and Debunk. And you can say High Priestess of Prophecy, and they'll be forced to discard it before it resolves. There's also Prohibition as well. If you just want to be a douche and say MST, well, you have to say Mystical Space Typhoon. Or you can say stuff like Herald of Perfection, so they can't bring it out. And we know how that's going.
Yeah. Main reason I got the card.
It's just good. It's also very good against Harpy decks.
You name Harpy Lady and they can't use any of them.
Except for Harpy Dragon, but they can't get that out.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to talk today about is cards that people... I've heard a lot of chat about Heavy Storm being put back to 1 and people want it because they can't stand people having a back row set up. This is my prediction. This won't come back. Probably ever. In fact, this Harpy's Feather Duster, I believe, now call me crazy, I believe Harpy's Feather Duster is more likely to come back than Heavy Storm. My reasonings, before you try to close the video, is because of pendulum summoning. Now, we don't know exactly where it's going to go, but if we can tell from XYZs and synchros, crazy shit's going to happen.
It's going to dominate the meta.
It is going to be the meta.
Yeah.
But what I like to think of it is because if you have a card in your pendulum zone that's treated as spells, if they're in the pendulum gates or whatever they're called, I don't know, and they're destroyed and sent from the field to the graveyard, they'll go into your extra deck. So basically, if you use Heavy Storm, you destroy their entire back row, and you also stack up your extra deck with pendulum monsters, which means you could stack up 2, get them in your extra deck, play 2 more, and pendulum summon them out. Which
Harpy's Feather Duster does not do.
Harpy's Feather Duster doesn't destroy your own, it's only your opponent's. Which basically means that if you destroy your opponent's and not yours, you could be putting yourself at more of a risk because you could be setting up their pendulums for next turn, for all you know. That's, like, we're not at that point yet, but this is why I believe that Harpy's Feather Duster, by the way, this is Turbo Pack 8, this is, you don't see a lot of them. Harpy's Feather Duster is more likely to come back than Heavy Storm because of pendulum summoning and the advantage that Heavy Storm would get you in pendulum summonings if you open a good hand. Obviously not yet, but later in the, in the pendulum summonings. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed our look on the current meta and the future meta. I know Haosren didn't talk a lot, kind of left it up to me today. If you liked, please comment of what your thoughts are. Like the video and subscribe for future commentaries and tips and tricks. And hopefully we'll be able to give you some good advice and some tips that might be able to help you win games. Hopefully the Firehand stuff worked, and let us know what you think. Yeah, and everyone have a nice day. Haosren and Dragoneither out.